lines. He said Bush put politics and ideology above science and health. Today, even leading Republicans such as Chris Christie and Rand Paul agree the war on drugs, ramped up by Bush during his 4 years in the White House, has been a dismal and racist failure. And that is something that we can all agree on. Everyone has strong opinions on. And the fact that, again, we talk about disproportionately punishing black people for the same use of the drugs, such as a lot of times marijuana and things like that, even though white people use it at the same rates. Those are the areas that are more specifically policed. There's some very interesting statistics about that. I do encourage you to read on, because it's not a lot of things. That's not a thing a lot of people really know that much about, but it is nonetheless very interesting. So, yeah, he groped actually women, as we know. 8 different women have come forward with claims that their former president groped them, in most cases, while they were posing for photos with them, which is very creepy. Bush touched her inappropriately. Rosalind Corrigan told Time magazine that Bush had touched her inappropriately in 2003 when she was just 16, saying, quote, "I was just a child." The former president was 79. Bush's spokesperson offered this defense of his boss, saying at 93, President Bush had been lowered into a wheelchair for roughly 5 years, so his arm falls on the lower waist of people with whom he takes the pictures. Yet, as Time noted, Bush was standing upright in 2003 when he met Corrigan. So, yeah, the 41st president, in conclusion here, and I think many of sound really sums it up, the 41st president of the United States was not the last Republican moderate or a throwback to an imagined age of conservative decency and civility. He engaged in race baiting, obstruction of justice, and war crimes. He had much more in common with the 2 Republican presidents who came after them than his current crop of fans and hagiographers, whatever it is, would like to believe. All right, so that's our first story there. Spent a lot of time on that. I did not realize how much time I spent on that. Jesus. We only have a certain amount of time here on the show. Wow. Okay, we're going to move on now very quickly with momentum from historic wins in last month's midterm elections. Incoming House Democrats are getting right in it. Democrats announced Bill H.R. 1 in a press conference on Friday and referred to it earlier in the week as in a Washington Post op-ed by Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi and Maryland Representative John Sarbanes, who led efforts to pass campaign finance reform for years. It's all about restoring voter rights, moving big money from campaigns, and strengthening ethics oversight in government. It's a great place to start, I think. One important point, though, the bill is likely not going to pass. It's a good first response to a mandate from voters who want some change and want someone to hold Donald Trump accountable, and for the future, make sure he never gets into the White House again. Our best friend in this debate is the public. We believe that it will have great support, and that message won't get lost on the Senate or on the President of the United States. And I think Nancy Pelosi here saying this, for once, has a pretty good point. A fact sheet with highlights of the H.R. 1 called for automatic voter registration, easier early voting, and online voter and national automatic voter registration, which is good and very important. An end to gerrymandering, a full restoration of the Voting Rights Act, parts of which were struck down by the Supreme Court in 2013. Very, very, very important point. It's good to see Democrats actually pulling these positions when they get back in the halls of power here. Like that a lot. Very important there. On big donors, H.R. 1 would require all political organizations to disclose their donors and to build a 21st century campaign finance system to increase and multiply the power of small donors, reaffirm Congress's authority to regulate money in politics, pushing back on Citizens United. Rules will also be tightened on super PACs. And here's the thing that I don't like about this. This is going to allow some people to say, okay, we've done enough. We don't have to kill Citizens United. No, Citizens United must absolutely die. It's one of the worst things it's the issue that destroys all other issues, because money in politics makes things just so incredibly unfair, and it's really what needs to happen. So that's something we cannot really get not really get any of these situations passed in any shape, way, shape, or form. Addressing ethics, transparency, and voter rights out of the gate would help Democrats tackle healthcare and immigration later on. So that is going to be very helpful for them down the road. All right. shocking allegations in North Carolina's 9th district, where Republican Mark Harris beat Democrat Dan McCready by as few as 905 votes, according to unofficial returns. And McCready conceded the race days after the election, but state officials quickly started to throw up red flags. On Tuesday, elections boards voted unanimously not to certify the results of the election. Today, it voted to continue investigating and to hold a meeting on December 21st to assess allegations of fraud. Very, very interesting on the Republican side, which is very crazy because, of course, but at the same time, it's not very crazy because, of course, what do you know? The Republicans are the ones committing fraud and complaining about it for nonstop, for years on years on years on years and years. The only applicable case of fraud is the only really applicable case of fraud is one committed by the Republicans. Of course. Like, that's probably the least surprising. It's probably the most surprising, yet least surprising thing in the world, that we finally have a case of voter fraud. And not so surprising is it's done by Republicans, of course, because projection is a trick that they've used millions and millions of times, it feels like, especially over the past few years in terms of talking about their political activities. So it's very, very funny that they decided to use that as well. So the board is collecting sworn statements from voters in rural Bladen County near the South Carolina border who describe people coming to their doors and urging them to hand over their absentee ballots, sometimes without voting them out. Others described receiving absentee ballots by mail that they had not requested, and it's illegal to take someone else's ballot and turn it in. Just so we know, among the allegations is that the individual who worked for the Harris campaign coordinated the effort to fill in or discard the ballots of Democratic voters who might have otherwise voted for McCready. Several of the affidavits came from elderly African-American voters. If these allegations are true, this is pretty much as blatant as voter tampering gets. Political operatives literally coming to the doors of elderly black voters and saying, yeah, you're going to need to hand over your ballots, and then discarding them if they were voting Democrat or filling them out for the Republican, which is absolutely, I mean, obviously it's awful, but, I mean, like, it's not that, it's not that surprising, and B, it's just shocking that actually, like, happens so blatantly. Like, you're very much used to Republicans kind of having a veneer of just normalcy behind it, and just saying, like, just getting things just at least somewhat normally. This is the Representative Pittinger. He referred to pretty unsavory people out there, particularly in Bladen County. Take a listen.
Have you ever heard of voter irregularities in the district? Is this something that's news to you?
It's been out there. We were fully aware of it. There's some pretty unsavory people out, particularly in Bladen County, and I didn't have anything to do with them. Let me just leave it at that.
How do you think this thing's going to play out?
I don't have a clue. I have my feelings about what's right and wrong, but let's leave that to those who are digging into it.
Yes, let's hope they do dig into it. Let's just say that. So, all right. Earlier this year, Democrats agreed to end the government shutdown just after a few days, in doing so without even a deal in place to protect DACA recipients. Now, fresh off an election, which will actually hand leverage back to the party for the first time in 2 years, it appears they learned all the wrong lessons from that experience. Okay, so The Hill is reporting that Senate Democrats, including high-profile Senators Kamala Harris and Cory Booker, who pushed for DACA protections to be included in last year's spending bills, are both hedging this time on whether or not they'll vote for one without it. Obviously, DACA is very important to me, but I'm not prepared to give you a definite answer on that yet, Harris told The Hill. Booker, who maintained he would push DACA protections into the bill, said he would not speculate on whether he'll vote for a bill without DACA in it. And he better, because that's something that I personally will be holding against him in my 2020 coverage, just to say the least. So we're going to be keeping a very close eye on them. Apparently, this appears to be a larger strategy by the caucus to not push for protections in this bill, which is great. Just abandon positions when you have power. Just abandon positions. January's brief government shutdown stemmed from Democrats insisting on adding language to a short-term spending package that would have protected from deportation immigrants who came to the country legally as children. Excuse me. Often referred to as dreamers, they acknowledged privately that the standoff didn't help, and many may have even imperiled vulnerable Democrats winning in red states like Indiana, Missouri, and North Dakota. Like, this is people literally. These two people are from some of the most blue states in the country. You got Cory Booker, and you got Kamala Harris. They would not be imperiled by actually having values here, which is very, very interesting. It's very, very interesting to realize. Like, they would not be imperiled by having values here, and they would not be forced to, like, they would not be in trouble. And the fact that they try to make that decision it's very telling, and something that we should watch if they ever want to run for president, which, from what we understand, they both do, which is interesting. So, it's likely the majority of people, though, who went on the voting vote this year did not remember something that happened back in January. I'm not sure I even remembered it. Yeah, so the Democrats took a stand, caved on a few days later, and got nothing out of the bad deal they did negotiate it. Had a stellar showing in an election 10 months earlier, and the big takeaway for the shutdown, it killed them. And they should really be the strong border party. And they should really not give they should just give up on this. Again, 1 month after they get a new House majority, and they're supposed to be taking this position. Supposedly that they care about DACA kids, which is probably, again, DACA kids are probably the least amount you could do to fix immigration. Like, just give the DACA kids is like helping the DACA kids is literally the smallest possible option. I'm sorry, literally the smallest possible option. Yeah. So, if you want to see what Republicans really think about voters, look no further than their attempt to steal power from incoming Democrats in Wisconsin, while also trying to limit voters' rights. In November 6th, Wisconsin voters chose Democrats in every statewide race, including for offices of governor, attorney general. Republican Governor Scott Walker was ousted in the process, and now GOP state lawmakers in the lame duck session are trying to force through a series of bills to limit the powers of Democratic Governor Governor-elect Tony Evers, and incoming Democratic Attorney General Josh Call. The state lawmakers announced the package of bills on Friday. They plan to hold a single hearing on the proposals on Monday, and then quickly move to a vote on Tuesday. Wisconsinites should be outraged, and this is a big deal. So, you got really some pretty crazy stuff happening. This has happened before in North Carolina, where pretty much the state legislature comes in just to sap all the power, literally, like, get rid of the will of the voters, and just to make sure it doesn't happen. And the fact that take away some of the power really is just absolutely incredible. That the fact that they can do that in an American democracy where the governor doesn't have any kind of powers to overrule here, it is really quite shocking. In addition to limiting the powers of some of Wisconsin's newly elected leaders, Republican lawmakers are also hoping to restrict early voting, change the 2020 presidential primary election date to ensure a far-right justice remains on the state Supreme Court, block the governor-elect from filling a pledge to withdraw the state from a lawsuit against the Affordable Care Act, and replace the attorney general with taxpayer-funded private lawyers chosen by GOP lawmakers in cases involving state laws. So, like, that pretty much takes away half his power. Wow. This latter move aims at protecting GOP gerrymandering, which previously gave them control of both chambers of the state legislature, along with the state Supreme Court and governorship. So that's, again, a key part of how they stay in power. And now that the Democrats threatening it, they want some big changes, and it's scaring them. And this is a very scary thing. The fact that they can do this in a democracy is absolutely crazy. And there has to be someone to stop. There has to be some sort of suing going on. Legal options here should be exhausted. And when I say exhausted, I mean exhausted, because this is ridiculous, and I cannot believe it's happening again in America. So in case it wasn't clear enough what their intentions are, GOP lawmakers want to block the incoming governor from making it easier for people to vote, and from banning guns in the Capitol. That's crazy. These are blatantly undemocratic, and some may be unconstitutional. And that is something that needs to be taken care of to the best of Tony Evers and Josh Call's ability, just absolutely immediately. So President Donald Trump has